In my last video, I talked for a while about my journey from Christianity to atheism and back again, sorta. As I mentioned in that video, I'm not quite ready to slap that label of Christian back on myself. Maybe I will again someday. I don't know. But I'm definitely not an atheist anymore. I certainly don't identify as such. As was the case with my last video, this is all going to be really off the cuff, really loose. This is not scripted. I don't have a blueprint here. I'm just going to kind of talk, empty my stupid head out there to the world, and see what happens. You know, maybe if somebody can get something out of it, great. If not, that's fine too. But I'll be honest, this is like the 8th take that I've done of just this intro alone. And if I could get sidetracked for just 1 second, I play guitar, okay? If you're a musician out there who might be listening to this, particularly if you're a guitar player, and maybe you have a home studio or a computer or laptop, whatever, and you're like me and you like to record your own music, you know how when you got a riff that you've practiced a billion times over and you're real comfortable with it, and you know you can't wait to get back, you get down there in the basement or whatever and get into the studio, and again, you've played it 1,000 times or whatever, and you've got it on lock. You hit that record button, all of a sudden you forgot how to play guitar at all. I know that if you're a guitar player out there listening to this who spends any amount of time recording, I know you can relate to that. Well, that's how I feel here. It's like I had all these ideas in my head, and this is what you get. I guess I'm learning a lesson here. I really should at least create some bullet points to follow, because man, I keep getting tripped up. And I tell you, this is the last take I'm doing. If I don't get it this time, if I can't make this work, it's never seeing the light of day, and nobody's ever going to hear this. But anyway, back to the subject at hand. Yeah, atheism, Christianity, belief, whatever. Where am I at now? Let's talk about that, I guess. Yeah, I think one of the things that separates where I'm at now from where I was, whether I was an atheist or whether I was a Christian, is, oddly enough, I felt pretty confident in my views when I was an atheist and when I was a Christian. I know that sounds weird and contradictory. When I was a Christian, I was really young, again, I kind of walked away from that in my, I don't know, early mid-20s. But, before I was shaken out of it, before I was pulled away from it, I was pretty damn sure of myself. Once again, I don't want to rehash stuff I already covered in the last video, but long and short of it is, I lived in an echo chamber, never really had my faith tested, never really, I wasn't the most well-read guy in the world back then. Truthfully, I'm still not, but yeah, so that faith was never going to stand up to any real scrutiny, and it didn't. And it was humbling, and for a while it was depressing, but I got over all that, and you know what? There was a certain amount of liberation that came with saying, you know what? I'm an atheist. The idea of having to let go of the notion of heaven or whatever, that was kind of a bum out, I guess, for a while. But I feel like it did. It offered me some clarity, and I felt like a very materialistic, non-spiritual, secular view of the world, I had became comfortable with that. And, I guess it kind of over time did make me feel a bit cynical and borderline nihilistic at times. Maybe I'll kind of nosedive into that in a future video. I don't want to get too hung up on my atheism. Right now, I kind of want to talk more about where I'm at currently. Although I guess that might be kind of hard, without relating it to, I don't know, whatever. We'll see. But yeah, so right now, I'm in this position where I'm trying to put everything together. I'm trying to sort out what exactly it is I believe. I have a lot of ideas, a lot of things that inform my views, and I've always been somebody who lives for the pursuit of truth. Okay. I've never been of the mindset that one can choose what they believe. That always struck me as odd when I would hear people say that, or when I do hear people say that. I choose to believe in God because this, that, or the other, right? I don't recall ever making a conscious choice to believe in something or to not believe in something. I'm either convinced or I'm not. Like I take information in, my brain processes that information, I try to work it out. So that concept of choosing a belief is very, very foreign to me. Granted, I'm aware that one can delude themselves, right? Repeat a mantra enough times, yeah, you'll eventually convince yourself of a lie or whatever it is, I guess. But I've never been interested in doing that myself. So I've always tried to kind of take whatever information that the world offered me and process it as best I can and come up with a worldview or a belief system or whatever. Figure it out. What is it that I believe? And just as kind of a side note, the word belief, I was having a conversation with a friend earlier today, and we talked about that word and its implications. To say you believe in something, the word belief kind of comes with a certain connotation. It comes loaded. It implies doubt, right? You would not ask somebody, and this is something that he put to me, I think it was an analogy or something he heard somewhere, whatever. You wouldn't ask somebody, do you believe in your parents? Like, that'd be ridiculous. No, I know my parents. I don't believe in them. I've met them a couple times, right? To the same extent, you wouldn't ask somebody, do you believe in the moon? Do you believe in the stars? Do you believe in the sun? Like, no, I've seen it. I've seen the moon before, right? I don't believe in the moon. I know the moon's there. Okay. So the whatever. I guess I'm getting sidetracked here, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. So yeah, belief does imply doubt. Because I don't believe in anything that I already know. Although maybe I kind of do. I don't know. So for instance, my wife is, she's the most amazing person I know. And I know a lot of people would say that about their spouse, but I mean that sincerely. One of the things that makes her amazing is she is the most, trustworthy person that I've ever met. The most honest and pure. And don't get me wrong, she's got her faults. Honesty, trustworthiness is not among them. And so if someone were to ask me, do I believe that she's been faithful to me in our, near 20 years of marriage? I could say, yeah, I believe that. But I actually know that. Now, do I actually know that for a fact, 100%? No. She could be fooling me all these years, and maybe I'm a sucker. But no, I wouldn't say I believe that she's been faithful. I'd say I know she's been faithful. That's how strong my belief is. It's transcended from belief to knowledge. Sorta, I guess. But technically no, because I have no proof of it. But still, I know it. I know it with every fiber in my bones that woman is, never been unfaithful. Faith, right? That's a word. But yeah, I am taking it on faith, I suppose, to a degree. Maybe that leap of faith that I'm taking isn't quite as much of a leap as, someone else who Maybe you married a fucking skank or a porn star and, yeah, I have faith in her. You're taking a fucking lot bigger of a leap than I am, but it's a leap nonetheless, whatever. No, if there's a point to any of what I just said. But again, as I said in the beginning, not sure really what's going to come out of my stupid head. Some of it might be stupid. But anyway. Yeah, one of the things that I've found is in the pursuit of truth, I think it's important to drop your ego. Okay? One of the traps that I remember falling into, and that I kind of still do from time to time, is, and I know that most of us have seen it online, and if you're watching a debate or whatever, or you're watching two people, more accurately, in a pissing match or whatever, and somebody clearly gets the upper hand and is just making the other person look like a fool. But that person who's being made a fool of just will not let it go. They start doing all the mental gymnastics that they have to win the fucking argument. That's the ego. You're not serving the truth at that point. You're serving your own ego. And so again, for me, if you're going to find the truth, you cannot allow your ego to stand in the way of that. So once again, whether I like what it is, whatever the conclusion is that I come to, whether I like it or not, whether it makes me comfy, cozy, or gives me the warm fuzzies is irrelevant. Okay. But I have to be honest and say, yeah, I would much prefer to have the warm fuzzies. I would much prefer to believe in something that makes me happy, that brings me peace and joy. So I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking for it, but I don't want to delude myself. I've been down that road before. Right now, I'm just going to throw some shit out there, and I'm going to put the caveat out right now. Like I'm about to talk out of my ass here. Okay. So before anybody calls me on it and tells me how ridiculous I am, okay, I get it. I know. There are so many possibilities. Just talking about the afterlife for a moment, because that's one of the more fascinating aspects. And really, that's what it all comes down to, right? Religion, spirituality focuses very heavily on what happens after we die. And most of us who are not of the atheistic mindset also concern ourselves with that. One possibility that I've kind of toyed around with is, okay, this consciousness, as I called it earlier, this lens. So again, just to kind of recap on one of the thoughts that I had fleshed out in my last video, whereas if time and space are interwoven, as Einstein laid out in his theory of general relativity, well, that means the past, the present, the future, they all exist simultaneously. And it in time, as we experience it here on Earth right now, it is an illusion. It's not how it actually works. But something is giving us that illusion, right? It's the same thing. I mentioned it last time. You take a record, a vinyl, you drop it on the record player, you drop the needle at the beginning. It goes from the beginning of the record to the end. And you can listen to Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, or Smokey Robinson, or whatever the fuck it is that you want to listen to, right? And you experience an entire album. Kiss Live, 1978, whatever. Okay? And man, you could swear you just listened to a Kiss concert. But it's just a vinyl, right? It's an illusion. It's a recording. The needle is experiencing that record, though. Once the needle's done, that doesn't mean that the record no longer exists. right? Once you get past, I want to rock and roll all night and move on to fucking, Love Gun or whatever, rock and roll all night's still there. It's just you're gonna have to reset the needle. But I think there are two. Okay, let me. Once again, I got to pump the brakes because I feel like I'm kind of going off the rails here. I think there's two very, very popular conceptions of what happens to us after we die. There's the, secular perspective, the atheist perspective, which is we die, we don't exist. Just like it was before we were born, it will be again, and that's it. You won't know it. So there's nothing really, nothing major, okay? Nothing much to speak of there. And of course, that is, as far as science can tell us, that's all we can know. We know that the body's dead, whatever. So that's one very real possibility. The other, of course, is you die and you go to heaven. You go up to the, heavenly realm and reunite with, lost loved ones. And that's a very popular view, of course, especially here in the Western world. Maybe you go to hell too, but that's, it's the same religion preaching both those things. So, and then, of course, with some of the more Eastern philosophies or religions, we have these concepts of reincarnation, which I actually think is, just as plausible as anything else. And maybe I can get into that later. But actually, I'll get into it right now. Screw it. One idea that I have, but I think when we talk about reincarnation, many of us think, oh, if you do good things in life, then you'll reach nirvana and that'll be heaven. You'll finally get there. But if you do shitty things in life, you'll come back as a fucking cockroach or a gecko or something like that until you can do better and whatever. I don't know about all that. I don't know that our behavior here on earth will impact how we manifest in the next life. I can say right now that I believe in something like that. I do not believe that we simply die and that's it. I don't believe that. I'm not sure exactly what it is I believe happens, but I don't think it's that. I think that this needle, this lens, this soul, this experience, whatever you want to call it, exists independent of the body. I feel like the body, it's just a ride. It's a meat suit or whatever, or it's like our brains are almost like attenuators. I think there is a higher plane of being, and I've talked about people with near-death experiences that have gone through this process, at least according to them. It's a very personal thing, and there's been quite a few that have been very compelling to me that I actually believe. I mean, I certainly believe that these people are telling the truth insofar as that's at least they're not lying. Of course, this is something, again, that's very, very personal that science really can't make any claim one way or the other on. Okay, so that's an element of, well, you got to have faith, I guess. Do you believe these people's accounts? Do you think that that there's something to it? Personally, I kind of do. I find it rather compelling, and I think that it kind of jives with some of these ideas of, again, there's something experiencing these meat suits. There's something experiencing this life. And I'm pretty sure I'm not articulating all this all that well, but one of the things, though, that I think is possible is not necessarily hell. But when I think about this consciousness, this soul, whatever it is, once it's done, once my life expires, once the Kiss Alive 1975 is over, right? That needle's got to get reset onto something else. And there's no telling what that might be. Okay, so, reincarnation, I guess. I mean, yeah, that would kind of suck, right? Come back as a cockroach, come back as a gecko. Who's to say you don't come back in some other galaxy, on some other planet that has intelligent life? Because that's the other thing. I mean, given the size of the universe, there's no way in hell that Earth is the only planet with intelligent life. Intelligent life that can host consciousness. This is not the only planet where the universe experiences itself, where God experiences himself, however you want to frame it. So we could come back anywhere in space, in time, right? You might not come back. And I think a lot of, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to make judgments and project anything on anyone else. But I think a lot of people probably, when they think about reincarnation, at least people who don't necessarily believe in it, but when they think about it or entertain the idea, think about it happening as, okay, you die tomorrow and then you come back as a cat and then, maybe you'll come visit your children, as a fucking stray cat or something like that. I think that would be very weird if it actually did work that way. I think that, because who's to say when, again, if time and space are interwoven, it's all relative. Who's to say you don't come back into the past? Right? Who's to say you're coming back in the future on this linear timeline? The future already exists. It's already happened. The end of the universe exists right now. Just as the Big Bang does right now, all time and space exists. So yeah, I could, for all I know, I could come back as some peasant in the 17th century dying of dysentery in some slum in France or something. That would suck. But, whatever. Some consciousness soul had to experience that, so why not me? Whatever, I don't know. So I rather do like the the stories that I get from the people that have had near-death experiences. Most of the stories don't sound like that. Oh yeah, I left my body and went into some fucking pauper in, 16th century France or whatever. It's usually a little more pleasant than that. And boy, I sure would like to believe that. Maybe it's true. That's the other thing. It may well be true, and they maybe could both be true, right? Maybe we ascend to heaven, but it may not be, it might be temporary, and then we go back to, some biological life and experience it, and then go back and forth and back and forth. Who knows? But that's an idea that I kind of play around with, that I think about very often, actually. Of course, I would like the notion of heaven to be true. I would like to believe that, what, I'm going to die, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to see my grandma again, I'm going to see my grandpa again, eventually my kids will see me there, and man, we'll all be in eternal bliss together forever, for eternity, and sounds great. I certainly would like it to be true, but I'm not sure that's what I believe. Again, I'm trying to figure it out. So, if you came to this looking for any answers, I'm sure you figured out by now that you're probably not getting any. Certainly not the ones you were looking for. But again, as I said from the outset, I don't necessarily have any of the answers. I'm putting all this stuff together, trying to figure out what it is that I believe. One idea that kind of freaks me out is, was it Nietzsche? Eternal recurrence. The idea that once your body dies, it's like the same record starting all over again for eternity. And every time you die, you're born again, and you're just trapped. Your consciousness, this awareness, it is trapped in that cycle. Now, that's just a thought experiment. It's, there's no scientific hypothesis or any reason to believe that might be true. But it is an interesting thought experiment to take on, to consider. For me, I've thought about it and thought to myself, like, well, whatever happens down the line, I in my 43 years here on this earth, I've had it pretty good. I have no real true regrets. I mean, there's things that I wish I would have done differently, I guess, but no real complaints. Would it be the worst thing if that were true? Like, I mean, hopefully I'm only like halfway through my life, right? I might have, who knows what the next 40 years might bring. Doubt I'll see another 40 years, but you get my drift, right? But whatever happens, if I die tomorrow, and it all has to start over again, it wouldn't be the worst thing for me. But I think about, small children dying of their teeth. Again, going back to centuries and centuries ago, when life was a lot less comfy than it is today. And that just endless cycle of a life of nothing but suffering, and some poor soul has to experience that over and over, unable to ever get free of it. That's hell. That is true hell. So I certainly hope that is not true. I'm pretty sure it's not. I'd be willing to bet a lot of money that it's not. But I mean, I suppose it's something worth entertaining, I guess. Certainly makes you think. I mean, because again, and I guess that's, I don't know. Again, for me, if I could elect it, like that wouldn't be the worst thing. Like I've loved my life. I've loved pretty much everyone in it. Again, I have no complaints. If I had to do this always, I'd be all right with it. But anyway, enough of that. So yeah, I don't know. But there's a lot that I see in the world that I think has influenced, there are a lot of external factors or things that have influenced where I'm at today, outside of just, these thoughts about physics and science and philosophy, all this stuff, right? I can see kind of, I don't know. I recognize that we as humans are pattern-seeking creatures. We look for this shit. I look at what's happening with technology, what's happening with society, and I don't really enjoy the thoughts that are evoked from it. Like I don't see becoming super dependent on greater and greater technology being a good thing. And I can expand on that another time, and then maybe I will. I did a video on AI and my thoughts on it, a while back. In fact, it was the first video I think I did on this channel. And I can expand on that further. There's been enough time between that video and now that, I've kind of adjusted some of my thoughts on it and whatnot. But, I can get into that another time. But let me just say, like, for right now, I don't like the way things are looking. And there's a lot of more sensitive subject matter that I could get into. When I'm talking about what I'm seeing happening in the world, what I don't like about it, that's going to really touch on some topics that I'm not super comfortable talking about. So I'll have to kind of consider very carefully how I lay my thoughts out there. So I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm not ready to do that quite at this particular moment. So for now, I'll just say that, yeah, I mean, I recognize that every generation, you go back to the dawn of man, every generation said the same thing probably, right? Like the world these days, it's all going to hell. We're going into end times. These kids these days, yada, 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 yada. I understand that. Okay. This time it's different. You know what? I do think it's different this time. I'm not saying the world is going to end tomorrow, or I believe that it's ending with this next generation or whatever, but I really don't like the trajectory of things. In keeping with this, the spiritual talk, and I mentioned AI a moment ago. The more we become dependent on technology, be it artificial intelligence or what have you, the further I feel that we get away from who we are, what we are. I don't believe, no matter how advanced AI gets, that there is true consciousness there. And I don't mean to paint consciousness. I don't want to start sounding all woo-woo, mystical, whatever. But I do think that there is an element that, like, the AI, it's artificial, as the name implies. Again, it can be created to... Another thing is, and I think I touched on this in the AI video that I did, is a lot of people call it artificial intelligence. Another way of looking at it is automated intelligence. Either way, it is not sapient. It never will be. I don't think it can be. It can fool us. I'm sure it will become advanced enough to be smarter than us, but, fuck, what was that thing on Jeopardy? Hal or whatever that beat the shit out of Ken Jennings or whatever? It's all glorified calculators. They just behave in such a way or work in such a way that is very, very impressive and fools us. But I have no doubt that eventually it will come to a point where we are going to be dealing with these artificial intelligence systems that are indistinguishable from humans and that will easily surpass us in so many different ways. That could be really dangerous. Not necessarily in a Terminator Skynet sort of way, although I acknowledge that that's a possibility too. But that, we're going to become so dependent on this stuff that we're going to lose sight of what it actually means to be human. And part of what it means to be human, unfortunately, I think, is to know pain, suffering, hard work. I think that's kind of crucial. And I feel like the easier and easier we have it, in fact, like the further we are pulled away from our true purpose, which is, is there, again, when I was an atheist, I wouldn't have never said that we had a purpose necessarily, but I do feel that, that we have a purpose here on this planet. If we are all independent, or individual, I should say, manifestations of the universe experiencing itself, then I think the point is to learn. I don't think, so let me go to something that I think maybe many of us have asked, or maybe if you have children out there, you've heard them ask, especially if you are, of a religious background. Why did God make suffering? Why does God allow suffering? Why does he let bad people do bad things? Why does he let bad things happen to good people? And the answer that I usually give, and I may have covered this in the last video, but whatever, is you can't know light without darkness. You can't know joy without pain. In fact, now that I'm saying it out loud, I know I covered this in my last video, but whatever. I'm saying it again. Yeah, I mean, love would be the default state if we didn't know the antithesis of love. And if it's the default state, then it means nothing. And I think the pursuit of utopia is hubris. I don't think that we can have utopia on Earth. And more often than not, maybe invariably, attempts to have it lead to disaster. And the more advanced technology becomes, the greater the stakes, the greater the disaster, or the greater the potential for disaster, right? So I worry about that kind of stuff. I don't know. There's so much more that I know that I want to talk about regarding this kind of stuff. And I'm not sure I want this channel to be nothing but like spiritual talk or whatever. Maybe. I don't know. I guess, I mean, this is, as I've stated before, I always wanted this channel to be just a place for me to come and empty my head, regardless of what it is that I'm feeling. Sometimes that might be mixed martial arts. Sometimes that might be animal fights. Sometimes it's more serious stuff like this. But in any case, I mean, I have no intention of shying away from this stuff. But I think the next time I come back, I'd like to organize my thoughts a little bit more ahead of time. I don't know. I kind of got to maybe rework a few things because, you know, I feel like a lot of times this is this long-winded shit. And yeah, it's conversational and it does work for me because I'm lazy. But I don't know. I think I can do better. Anyway, whatever. You don't need to sit here and listen to all that. But I do appreciate you sitting here this long, if you have. Feel free to share your thoughts below. I'm going to call it good for now. I'll see you in the next one.